Hello viewers and learners of the Postgraduate Diploma in Environmental and Occupational Health. The course code for this session today would be MEV 001. I introduce myself as Dr. Sushmita Bhaskar, working in the discipline of Environmental Studies at the School of Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Studies, Indira Gandhi National Open University. We will discuss on soil pollution and its effects. So as we all know, soil is a very important constituent on the earth's surface, and we are dependent on the various bioforms, the life forms. The soil has different types of minerals, and these minerals are also very important for our health. And then there is a lot of the biogeochemical cycling of the elements that take place in the soil ecosystem, and we will see how the soil gets polluted from the various environmental factors, industrial factors, the anthropogenic reasons, and the ways where we can preserve and conserve the soil for the benefit of humanity as well as to the environmental health. How there are innovative and creative techniques, bio-friendly pesticides and the fertilizers can be used, which will not cause any harm on the soil, and no contaminant will be seen in the soil ecosystem. So the learning objectives of this module: after listening to this video, you should be able to define soil pollution, describe the sources of soil pollution, the types of soil pollutants, and explain the effects of soil pollution, and discuss some prevention measures to reduce soil pollution. So soil, this is the unconsolidated outer layer of the earth's crust. It consists of minerals, organic material, that living organisms, air, and also the water. Now the process of soil formation is quite complex, and the various physical, chemical and the biological transformations are very important in the process of soil formation. So let me tell you, this takes several years, several millions of years for even a small profile of the soil to be formed. So that is why it is a very precious natural resource, and we need to conserve the soil resources sustainably. There are various factors for the soil formation. First of all, the parent rock is important. The type of the parent rock is also very important. Then the weathering of the rocks. This can be carried out from the physical weathering. Then you can have the chemical weathering, where the acidic, the carbonic acid and so on, this can help in the formation of the soil. Then we have the biological weathering, where lichens and certain other bioforms, the living organisms, that can actually break the rocks and then make the soil. So you can have the coarse and then the fine soil formation. Then climate and relief, this is also very important. Then the living organisms, they also play a very important role in the formation of soil. So there are several factors which go in, and in the same way the type of soil that is formed, so the time of the soil formation, this is also dependent upon the extremely dry weather conditions or extremely cold weather conditions. All this can result in whether the soil formation, at which pace this is being formed. So therefore the topmost layer of the soil, if you see in a soil profile, so this topmost layer of the soil, this is rich in nutrients and it supports a maximum biological organisms. This is composed of minerals of varying sizes. Then there is organic matter, and you have the pore space which is filled with the air as well as the water. Then there are different classes of the soil types, and that is based on the particle size distribution patterns. So these are the soil layers. So you see the O, A, B, C and the R. So the parent rock or the unweathered parent rock is referred to as R in the soil horizon. Then the C is referred to as the parent rock. Then the B is the subsoil, where a little bit of weathering has occurred, and it is a mixture of sand, silt and clay. Then you have the A horizon, where the organic matter is mixed with the mineral matter. Then you have the topmost layer, which is really rich in the organic content, where you have the organic matter alone. So these are the constituents, and they constitute a soil profile, the different layers of a soil. The soil ecosystem, this includes the inorganic and the organic constituents and the microbial groups. The soil biota, this can be categorized as bacteria, then algae, fungi, actinomycetes, protozoans, nematodes and also the microarthropods. Now the soil biota helps in the decomposition of soil, organic matter and also in the various nutrient cycling. Soil microbes are the active agents in the decomposition of plant, animal waste, and they are referred to as nature's garbage disposal system. So that is why the soil microbes, they have a very important role in the decomposition and the recycling of the waste naturally in the earth's surface. Now these surface soil microbes, they keep the earth free of toxins and they help in the biogeochemical cycling of the elements. For example, in the carbon cycle, in the nitrogen cycle, and also in the phosphorus cycle. But let me tell you, the soil gets contaminated through different ways, and this is referred to as soil pollution, also as the land pollution. So soil pollution, this can be defined as an undesirable change in the soil physicochemical properties. This can result in adverse effects on human beings, plant life, and also on the animals. Soil pollution, this occurs when the presence of some toxic chemicals or contaminants in the soil, this is reasonably in a higher concentration than its normal amount, and that can pose health risk to the plant life, to the health of the human beings, and also to the animal life and animal health. So that is where we say that the soil has become polluted or contaminated with some other heavy metal and so on. Global warming, unsustainable practices, for example the agricultural practices, then you have the fertilizers and the chemical pesticides which are used for the agricultural practices. All these are responsible for converting the arable land to non-arable lands, and finally this can lead to a process known as desertification. So therefore desertification will also lead to the soil getting totally out of its own biota, and again the soil health is totally destroyed, the soil life will also be totally destroyed. Therefore, soils are often contaminated with persistent toxic organic compounds, with certain chemicals, salts, radioactive materials, and also the biological disease causing agents. Then the pollution of the soil, this makes the soil less suitable for the crop cultivation. It can cause severe ecological disturbances. So you have seen that whenever the soil is contaminated with, for example, heavy metals, you can also have e-waste, you can have the domestic waste. So all this will actually make the soil unfertile, and it is no more fit for any kind of the crop cultivation. So then you have to renovate the soil, you have to rejuvenate the soil with the minerals, with the bioforms. Only then these ecological disturbances can be contained. Soil contamination. So when we talk about the soil contamination, we can have this pollution or the contamination from the several industries, from the agricultural practices as we discussed now. Then we have the heavy metals. There can be several heavy metals like chromium or cadmium or lead. All this can degrade the soil quality, and these in turn make the soil less fertile to support life. So which are the sources of the pollution? From where do these contaminants come into the soil? The first one, let us say the agricultural sources. So in the agricultural sector, they can come, the contaminants or the sources of pollution can come from the chemical herbicides, the insecticides, fungicides, nematicides, miticides, the rodenticides, and also the molluscicides. So all these are used to control the nematodes or the worms, then the certain amount of the mites, the leaf organisms, then the rodents, and also the mollusk, which are the small snail-like organism belonging to the phylum Mollusca. Then DDT is also being sprayed on top onto these agricultural fields, which is nothing but dichloro-diphenyl trichloroethane, and this has adverse effects on the soil health and also on the human health. So all these chemicals, they can be bioaccumulated in the plant life, in the animals, and also later on it could be bioaccumulated in the human beings, and that can cause severe toxicity to the human beings. After the Second World War, many countries, they suffered from the food shortage, and this actually basically introduced the chemical fertilizers and other agricultural chemicals. So pesticides such as the DDT, a chemical pesticide, this was introduced, which was recognized as a potent nerve poison in many of the insects. This was found to bioaccumulate in the food chains. Then such persistent pesticides like the DDT, this can accumulate in the bodies of the animals, and over a period of time they increase in their concentrations, and if the animal is unable to flush out the toxins from the body, then that leads to a condition which is referred to as bioaccumulation. So when this organism, or when this animal which has bioaccumulated the concentration of that DDT is affected, and that is consumed by an animal at the higher level in the food chain, for example the carnivore, then in that case the pesticide is further concentrated in the carnivore. In the same way, this phenomenon of increasing in the concentration of a non-biodegradable substance along the food chain is referred to as biomagnification. DDT is also seen to prevent the shelling of the bird eggs. So, this is also another negative effect which is seen in the animals. In the same way, Vietnam, the war of the Vietnam in 1970s, that introduced another chemical, dioxin. So, dioxin is a toxic chemical and it was used as a defoliant by the American army, and after the war it was found that the chemical caused congenital deformities and mental aberrations to the children born to the American soldiers. Insecticides such as lead arsenate, calcium arsenate, then the Paris green, all these are extensively used and they can penetrate the soil and also the groundwater. Fertilizers. Farmers started using the artificial fertilizers at the end of the 19th century, and that enabled more land to be brought under cultivation. The production of these man-made fertilizers, that requires a large amount of energy and it depletes the world's resource of the phosphate ore. So, in recent decades, the use of the inorganic fertilizers, that has also increased dramatically. Between 1952 and 1985, if we see the global consumption of these fertilizers, that dramatically increased from 14 million tons to 125 million tons. So, this is a tremendous increase. Inorganic fertilizers, they are used in preference to organic fertilizers because the nutrients are available more readily, they are available in a more readily form, and they are released quickly after their application to the soil. So, that causes the farmers to use the inorganic ones in comparison to the organic fertilizers, which act at a slower rate and pace. Now, some examples of the fertilizers which are used is the ammonium sulphate, then urea. All these are known to reduce the soil pH, and excess use of these inorganic nitrogen fertilizers, they will result in the soil acidification. It also results in a condition which is found in the newborn babies referred to as the methemoglobinemia, where the blood, it is unable to carry the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood is considerably reduced. So, this is referred to as the blue baby syndrome, and specifically the nitrates are responsible, the chemical fertilizers are responsible for this disease condition to be manifested. So, the excess nitrates, that is basically a health threat to the infants. So, the nitrates are converted to nitrite and that reacts with the hemoglobin, which reduces the blood's ability to carry the oxygen, leading to a condition known as methemoglobinemia. Now, this is a methemoglobin levels which is found below 3%, then the signs and symptoms are basically none. When it is found in a concentration between 3 and 15%, then the blue or the slate grey skin of the baby appears. When it is found in a condition where you have 15 to 30% of the methemoglobin levels, then cyanosis and chocolate brown blood is observed. Between 30 to 50% of the methemoglobin levels, breathlessness occurs, there is headache, there is dizziness and syncopial attacks. Between 50 to 70% of methemoglobin levels, tachypnea, lactic acidosis, arrhythmias, seizures, central nervous system depression, coma and death can occur at a concentration which is above 70% of the methemoglobin levels. So, these are the signs and the symptoms where the doctors see or the medical professionals see where the percentage of the methemoglobin levels are also monitored in the newborn children and the infants. Excess salt and water, this is again another condition, salinization, where the impregnation of the soils by the salts occurs, gypsum, sodium sulphate, magnesium sulphate and sodium chloride, that can lead to these conditions, and they precipitate from the groundwater by evapotranspiration during the dry spells. So, therefore, excess irrigation that can shift the groundwater level and it is a significant cause of soil salinization. Irrigation water will contain the dissolved salt, and in dry seasons the evaporation can lead to the salt precipitates in the top layer of the soil. This saline salt, this will result in the stunted plant growth, lower yield, and also the production, also the productivity, the soil productivity also decreases to a considerable extent. Therefore, the next is the industrial sources. So, we have seen the agricultural sources, mainly we have focused on the fertilizers and the pesticides. Now, from the industrial sources, there are several industries, like you find the textile industries, they use a lot of dyes, pigments, and lot of chemicals which go into the processing and manufacturing in the textile sector. In the same way, tannery, they also use a large number of the pigments like chromium, and also various other kind of the like sodium hydroxide, sodium chloride, and various other chemicals. Chlorine is used in the bleaching process and so on. Then you have the chemical industries, where several type of acids and chemicals are used in the electroplating industries, glass, in distilleries, in paper and petroleum industries, in the cement industries, and finally the pharmaceutical industries. So, from all these you have the various chemicals, the heavy metals which are released to the soil, and that can cause irreversible effects on the soil health, in the food chain, and also to the human health. Now, these are the heavy metals which are normally encountered in the soils. We have the wood preservatives. From the industrial sector, several heavy metals are released. From the mining sector, from sewage water, from the urban waste, from the smelting of the ores, from pesticides themselves, you have from the rocks, and also from the fertilizer. So, heavy metals can be released in the soil from these various sources. Nuclear waste sources. So, we have the radioactive material, and they are also released into the soil from nuclear explosions, atmospheric fallout from the nuclear dust, discharges from the radioactive laboratories, and so on. Uranium, thorium, radium, and cesium, they are commonly found in the environment, and that keeps emitting the radiations and persist for a long time. So, all these radioactive pollutants also, they can bioaccumulate in the plants, and radiations can also enter the human beings when the plants and the foods containing them are ingested, resulting in mutations and also genetic disorders. Urban waste. So, this normally consists of the plastic, you have the municipal waste, then the hospital waste also contains certain organic material, chemicals, then they have the bio-infectious waste, the metal needles, plastics, then the plastering agents, then you have the glass bottles, vials, injection needles, vials, and so on. So, here again the urban waste also cause a very big threat to the soil ecosystem and health. Then you have the electronic waste. Here again from the CPU, from the cathode ray tubes, you have the lead, then beryllium, cadmium, phosphorus. So, the e-waste can also enter the soil when all these things are being released, from one part, when you actually segregate the parts from this, for example from the cathode ray tube or from other computer hardwares and so on. So, Gaiyu is one of the oldest and largest informal e-waste recycling sites in China in the world, and here very small children are also being employed, and they actually segregate these things like from televisions, from the old laptops or from the mobiles. They are involved in separating each and every, whether it is a copper wire or whether there are various other components, and then they recycle them. So, here again when the workers were actually analyzed, when their blood was analyzed, they contained high levels of the vanadium, of chromium, of manganese, then molybdenum, stannum, that is tin, and lead. So, therefore, their workers are also at high risk when they are segregating this e-waste and when they are doing it in an informal way, because there are several mechanisms, several safety precautions that have to be taken when, even if you are doing this in the proper way. So, e-waste also has a very negative effect on the soil ecosystem and health. Giving some case studies, uranium in Punjab, okay, this was actually noticed in the soil and also in the groundwaters. So, here we find in the 8 districts in Punjab, there is 50% of more content of the uranium, and almost in Faridkot, in Bathinda, in Mansa, Moga, and Fazilka, here we find that the uranium content is more than 600 parts per billion. So, several of the children who were seen there, they had the birth defects, like they had the hydrocephaly, microcephaly, then cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, and also certain cancers. So, you can see in this newspaper article, it is written that Punjab ke peyjal mein uranium par chinta. So, that is, it is really a very serious concern that the uranium content is really high in these regions, and cancer trains are also running from Punjab to All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi, where people are being treated for various carcinogenic disorders. So that means something is wrong. The water is contaminated with these radioactive elements. The soil is also contaminated, where the vegetables and fruits may also contain these compounds. So we have to see from where this is actually entering the soil ecosystem. Granite rocks themselves that can lead to the uranium contamination, as they consist this, and also the phosphate fertilizers and combustion of coal in the thermal power plants and mining activities. So they can release certain amounts of the uranium. Fertilizers themselves, they contain elevated levels of uranium, as their phosphate component is derived from phosphate rock, that is from the uranium itself. Another case study is that from cashew nuts in Kerala. So these were considered as poisonous nuts once upon a time. In Kasaragod, the one of the plantation corporation of Kerala, so they actually sprayed the endosulfan, which is again a persistent organochlorine compound pesticide. This was sprayed on the cashew nut plantations using a helicopter. So large acres of the land was actually sprayed in Kerala, and the ill effects of using this endosulfan was seen in the cashew plantations of the Kasaragod district, where a number of children who were born, they had these birth defects and teratogenic disorders. Another case study is that of the Love Canal tragedy, which is a waste mismanagement. So near the Niagara Falls in New York, USA, a plastic manufacturing company, they actually disposed their waste in the sealed steel drums, and 20,000 different tons of 80 different chemicals, they were dumped into these canals, and this was actually constructed by William T. Love, and that is why the name goes as the Love Canal. And it was actually built in order to connect two reaches, and to build some kind of a canal which can connect the two places, but then finally that never materialized, and then this canal was actually dumped with so much of the waste. Now after 20 years, so no one at that time realized that this waste, and since they were sealed, they never thought that this could actually leach and become a very big waste hazard, and a compromise on the human health. But after 20 years, heavy snow and rains that actually started attacking the sealed plastic waste, and that corroded these drums, and that started leaking into the soils, into the building and the water. Because after that, after 20 years, what they had done was they had actually put the vegetation onto it, that is they had dumped a lot of soil onto it, and revegetation occurred, and a school also was constructed on top of this part. So many of the children who were actually playing on the school ground, they complained of their rubber soles that were actually dissolving, disintegrating, and some of the children who were playing on this slides and all that, they suffered certain burns on their hand. It was then that the authorities started looking into the matter, and then that entire area was sealed. The children and the people staying in that area, they were relocated to a different place, and several kinds of the carcinogens, benzene, chloroform, dichloroethylene, these were all actually observed as waste material. So the schools, the homes were all destroyed, the families were relocated, and then the soil was completely covered with compacted clay. The waste were diverted to a treatment plant, and the water pipes were also blocked with the barriers, otherwise the water was also totally contaminated. So this figure you can see where about 22,000 tons of over different types of the chemicals, they were dumped into this Love Canal ditch from the period 1942 to 1953. So you can see how that one small incident, if they had actually taken care of disposing and treating the waste properly initially at that time itself, then it would not have costed them so much, both in terms of the monetary part in money, and also that is the amount of money that was spent for treatment, and also in the amount of the people and the soil that was actually totally contaminated and polluted. So Love Canal took 21 years and $400 million to clean up from the toxic dumping. Who will clean up the dumped and spilled toxic tracking water? So this was actually a poster that was made, and this actually highlights the importance of the soil health and how a small mistake can actually cost us a lot. Now Jharkhand, this is actually here, there is food insecurity and the lack of knowledge among the farmers about the chemical fertilizers led to the misuse of chemical pesticides, and there was a six-fold increase over the last 6 years, and they used monocrotophos, which was hazardous and banned in India. But then the farmers were not educated about this. So they have been using this from 2005 on chili, on capsicum and on cucumber, and then on the cotton beans, on cauliflower, they use the profenophos, cypermethrin and so on. So because they were unaware of the hazards of the application, and it was the failure of the state government to regulate this sector, and therefore there should be the policy to shift the agroecological farming, that is very much required, and this will produce food that is healthy and it will suit the people's culture and the tradition. Because farmers were unaware between the waiting period also from the time of the application of the pesticide and the harvest. So this again caused a lot of the soil health harm, and then that is why the policies and the state government also should take up the case, and innovations should also come up from their side. Now this was in Bundelkhand in Uttar Pradesh and in the Madhya Pradesh, where the villagers are overcoming by innovating. They are making their own fertilizers from the cow urine, from the neem leaves, from water, from gram flour, and also certain NGOs are also giving lot of trainings, and this benefits of the organic farming. So here the farmers are now aware of this, the misuse and the harms that are caused by the chemical fertilizers, and it has benefited them, their income has increased, and the cost for the production has also considerably decreased. So this is a very good way. And in the same way in Arunachal Pradesh, the Apathani valley, here also the jhum, the slash and the burn technique is predominant, and they have, the Apathanis, they have a unique forest management system where they demarcate their forest, their private bamboo forest, private mixed clan forest and so on, their sacred groves. So they also get their bamboo demand from their own private groves. They grow 6 varieties of rice with water which is controlled using the bamboo tubes. Then the canal walls, they have used the plant varieties like the Eleusine Coracana that can provide the end season leafy vegetables. In the same way, the soil nutrients that they give for their system, that is also coming from their forest like the mixed oak forest. So here the crops that require the less rainfall, that should be grown in the drought prone areas, and small and marginal farmers, they need to practice a mixed farming in order to tide over the crop failure during to droughts. Therefore, finally we can conclude and summarize that proper waste disposal is very important. Biofertilizers are important, where we can conduct the training programs and we can educate the farmers about the chemical hazards of these chemical fertilizers. There should be a ban on the toxic chemicals. Reforestation and soil conservation is very important for the control and prevention of soil pollution. So this way, dear learners, today we have discussed about the soil pollution and its effects on human health, and how there are some case studies which are showing you the negative impacts, and also some case studies where the farmers are aware of them and how they use their own systems by using the biofertilizers. So these are some ways how we can conserve our soil ecosystem and prevent the soil from getting contaminated from the heavy metals and other very harmful radiations and other chemicals. Thank you for your patient listening.